Welcome to an English subject enhancement video. This session will be looking at word classification, verbs.
This video will focus on finite and non-finite verbs, subject, verb, object, active, passive voice, transitive, intransitive verbs, verb inflections, infinitive, participle verbs, linking verbs, auxiliary verbs, phrasal verbs, and imperative verbs.
Verbs. A verb is a word that expresses an action, an occurrence, or a state of being. Some verbs identify an action, such as the sentence, Jennifer read her book. Other verbs identify thoughts and feelings. She wondered how the story would end, the verb in that sentence being the idea of she wondered. So how do you recognize a verb? So in some cases you can recognize a verb by the way it ends. For example, an ending ify is nearly always a verb. Other verbs sometimes end with ate or ise. For example, specify, pollinate, and fertilize. Words ending in the suffix s, ing, ing, and ed, may also sometimes be verbs. And these are verb inflections: chatters, chattering, and chattered. Finite and non-finite verbs. A finite verb shows the tense. A sentence normally needs at least one finite verb. I want a new phone. I wanted a new phone. The verbs want and wanted are finite verbs. They show the tense. They show the simple present and past tense. I want a new phone is the simple present. I wanted a new phone is the past. A non-finite verb adds extra information to a sentence and do not indicate a particular tense. Needing a rest from revision, Sam decided to go and play football. The non-finite verb in that sentence is needing. It's part of the subordinate clause and adds extra information to the main clause. Subject, verb, object. Most sentences contain a subject and a verb. The subject is the person or thing doing the action, and the verb shows the action. For example, the subject Hugo giggled. Subject, verb, object. Many subjects have a subject, a verb, and an object. The object has the action done to it. It shows who or what the verb is acting on. So in this instance, the subject Oliver played the computer game. Next, we'll move on to active and passive voice. When a sentence is in the active voice, the subject does the action. Oliver, the subject of our sentence, kicked the ball. He is the subject doing the action. When a sentence is in the passive voice, the subject is acted on. The ball was kicked. In this instance, the subject is the ball and the action was done to it. Next, we'll move on to transitive and intransitive verbs. When a verb is used with a subject and an object, it's called a transitive verb. Hugo loves biscuits. An example of some transitive verbs are hit, give, buy, collect, make, or take. When a verb has a subject but no object, it's an intransitive verb. Hugo giggled. Some intransitive verbs include arrive, go, agree, sleep, and stay.
Verb inflections.
Verb inflections are very important. Most verbs change when they are used. They change depending upon the following things. When something happens, in other words, the tense, I play football every Sunday, or I played football last Sunday. They change depending on who or what does something, the subject of the verb. He plays football every Saturday. They play football every day. Or they change whether the verb is passive or active. We play matches most weekends. Matches are played most weekends. Is an infinitive verb. So let's get to the nitty-gritty. What is an infinitive verb? The infinitive is the basic form of a verb. It's the name a verb is known by, and it often has the word to in front of it. To play, to run, to swim, to learn. What is a split infinitive? Placing another word between to and its verb is called a split infinitive. You have to really try. Try is the verb. You have to really try. The word really splits the infinitive.
Participle.
What is a participle? Participles are formed from verbs. There are two types of participles, present participle and past participle. Present participles are formed by adding ing to the infinitive. To think becomes thinking. Present participles are sometimes used as adjectives. It has been an exciting day. Past participles are normally formed by adding ed to the infinitive of the verb. To wait becomes waited. Past participles are often used as adjectives. Everyone was very tired. Let's now turn our attention to linking verbs. The most common linking verbs are be, become, get, go, turn, seem, appear, feel, sound, taste, and look. Auxiliary verbs. The verbs be, do, and have can all be used as auxiliary verbs. This means they are used with a main verb. They are sometimes called helping verbs because they help the main verb. For instance, the verb form do can become does, do, and did. Let's explore the auxiliary verb to be. The auxiliary verb be is used in progressive tense. The progressive present tense, I am baking a cake, Oliver is reading a book, we are going to the farm. And the progressive past tense, Helen was hoping to pass the test results were missing from the lab. The auxiliary verb to do. The auxiliary verb to do is used in questions and short answers. Do you want to go to the cinema? No, I don't, thanks. And they often are used to emphasize an action. He did pass his driving test. The auxiliary verb to have. The auxiliary verb to have is used in present tenses. The present perfect, it has rained all day. The past perfect, it had already arrived. And the future perfect, Oliver will have saved enough money for the trip. Modal verbs are a type of auxiliary verb. A list of modal verbs are can, could, will, would, may, might, shall, should, must, and ought to. Modal verbs can be used to show that an action will happen in the future. I will give Bob a bath. They are used to show an action is possible. I may give Bob a bath. And they're used to show an action is needed or wanted. You must give Bob a bath. Phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are a verb that gains new meaning when it's followed by a preposition or an adverb. For example, run into and run away are both phrasal verbs formed from the verb run, with the preposition being into. Phrasal verbs can be transitive and intransitive. Transitive phrasal verbs need an object to make it make sense. Sue filled out the questionnaire. Intransitive verbs don't need an objective. The car broke down. Imperative verbs. Imperative verbs are verbs that create an imperative sentence, which is a sentence that gives an order or command. When reading an imperative sentence, it will always sound like the speaker is bossing somebody around. Imperative verbs don't leave room for questions or discussion, even if the sentence has a polite tone. Give me that book. Clean your room. Do your homework. Thank you for listening to this English subject enhancement video on the word classification verbs.